There we go. So now I'm excited to welcome and introduce you to Tamara Torres. She has a passion for helping busy professionals align their values with their schedules to have the time and energy for what matters most. Her background in psychology and I was worried about this word, integrative, right? Medicine, along with 20 years of mindfulness meditation, have honed her unique skills to help her clients achieve results. Her personal values include connection, well-being, service, autonomy, and growth. And she is the founder of Optima Results Coaching. Thank you for being here, Tamara. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Bailey, for having me. Also, thank you to the Impact Hub for hosting. And Bailey has been especially instrumental in making sure that all of us speakers have the technology that we need. She actually met with me twice to make sure that I had what I needed. So hopefully this will go off today without too many snafus. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, everybody can see okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. All right. So hopefully you're all in the right place. This is Productivity with Presence, the Mindful Advantage to Work and Life. And my goal today is not to teach you all the steps to master mindfulness, but rather to share the benefits, to motivate and inspire you to invest some time in the practice in order to experience the benefits for yourself. We'll also take a brief pause for intermission before the first hour ends, because my experience is that 2 hours is a long time. It's pretty hard to get through even an hour without some kind of break. So just so you know that you have that coming up. So some of the learning objectives are what mindfulness is and isn't, some of the benefits, different practices, how mindfulness relates to productivity, connection, and communication. And also, Bailey, now that you're, are you co-hosting or not?
I don't think I'm co-host, but I can still see the chat and participants, so can keep an eye on that.
Sure. I'm just wondering if we need to admit anybody else.
Oh, sure. Okay. Katie, are you co-host?
I might want to just pop out of this just to
I don't know what co-host means, but I had the ability to share, so I just added multiple participants can share. I don't know if that's helpful.
It looks like you're co-host, Katie, so if you notice any other participants that pop into the waiting room, if you could just let them in.
Okay.
That would be great. Okay.
Great. I'll be in charge of that. Happy to do so.
Okay, thank you. And then of course there'll be time for questions and discussion. Try to make this as interactive as possible. So we'll jump in with a practice that started with the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, which began within Google and has been taught to many corporations and is now available to individuals, not just this practice, but they have an entire program to teach leadership. And the Minute to Arrive micro practice is for teams to be present and focused. This can be a useful tool when starting a meeting at work or whenever you begin a new task with others. And what we're going to do is we're all just going to take a deep breath and a pause. Just take 1 minute to focus your attention on the breath. Allow the body and the mind to settle. Hopefully you feel a little more grounded and have the presence to begin. And this is a great little practice that you can do at various moments throughout your day. Here's a picture of me a couple of decades ago. And this reminds me of my early path to meditation. A little background about myself and my family. My dad was from the East Coast outside of Boston, and my mom was from further east, Tokyo. She was born and raised in Japan, and Buddhism was part of her cultural upbringing. I remember my parents going to a meditation group when I was young, and they were off in another room meditating, and I was in a separate room reading Stuart Little. So I didn't get to meditate when I was a kid, but I definitely had some curiosity about it. So this photo was in the mid-90s, I think my first year of college, and not long, and actually I wanted to mention that the hairstyle, my dad used to joke that I modeled my hairstyle after the Buddha, and I didn't get it for a long time because my vision of the Buddha was the kind of the Chinese presentation with the bald head, and I didn't think of the Buddha as having hair, but apparently we had very similar hair. So maybe we can do a little challenge of who wore it better. But not long after this photo was taken in my first year of college, my parents actually separated. And this was a big surprise to me because I thought they had a wonderful relationship. And during the time of their separation, my dad stayed in the house. My mom moved out, found an apartment, and my dad renewed his meditation practice and went deep into Vipassana meditation with a teacher named Goenka and started doing silent retreats. And I think that practice helped their relationship and their communication and provided a lot of insights to themselves and to each other. And after 2 years of very intentional separation and weekly meetings and conversations with each other, they were actually able to get back together and be stronger, which I feel is really unusual after a separation of that time. And I'm sure there are many other factors other than meditation and mindfulness, but I feel like that was really pivotal for them renewing their relationship. Then after college, I started training as an EMT, and it became clear that I was going to need additional resources to help people manage physical and emotional trauma, as well as learn to be resilient myself. And I took my first meditation course in the year 2000, so it's been a full 20 years this summer. I realized more recently how much my practice informed my day-to-day life and helped me to be a kinder person, more compassionate, as well as more focused. And understanding what the mindfulness practice helped with my own productivity, it made sense to start sharing this skill set with my clients. And so this is actually the first time I'm doing a presentation on mindfulness or meditation. And a caveat is I am not a mindfulness teacher. I'm someone that's been doing it about half my life and feel like I've learned a fair amount. And hopefully you will as well. So I just want to take 30 seconds to go around and do introductions, sharing your name, something that you're working on or passionate about. And Katie, since you're co-hosting, I'm wondering if it's possible for you to maybe start with yourself and then kind of pass the ball along to the next person and make sure that people are unmuted. That would be great.
Happy to do so. Can we put the questions in the chat here too? I normally do that, but I've been multitasking.
Sure. So it's just 30-second introductions with name and what you're working on or passionate about.
Got it. So Katie Kaufman, the Executive Director here at Impact Hub. And before jumping into what I'm working on, I just want to state that I've been using mindfulness and meditation probably not every day, but probably for about 12 years. And I'm really excited for this course that you're doing because it has been really helpful to me as a tool in the toolbox of things. So just my husband does it every day. So he's probably he's just definitely more of a person that can like, he's great with his like practice of like every day he has his like things that he are non-negotiables, and meditation is one of them. So it helps in our marriage more because of him, less because of me. And then I'm just really passionate about it's hard enough to run a business and make a profit. It's even more difficult when you are trying to be intentional about how your business impacts your communities, your world, like the SDGs. So doing business for good generally. And we talk more about that in the for-profit space, obviously nonprofits as well, is like the whole reason that Impact Hub exists. And I'm inspired by entrepreneurs and business professionals every day that are adding that extra layer into their practice. And this program is so helpful because it's hard on us. Like we have to take care of ourselves so we can then be the most productive. And that is what gets me excited every day and probably gets me out of bed. And I'm in the perfect job because I love this work and I love the people that are part of our community that motivate me and inspire me every day. And then you wanted me to call on somebody else and unmute them. So I'm just going to go whoever's at the top of my list. And Chris, you're the first person.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Johnson, a recent transplant to Minneapolis. We took possession of the house we're in back in November, and finally in late May, the same week of George Floyd's murder, we completed the sale of our house in St. Peter, Minnesota, about an hour and a half southwest. So one of the things I'm working on yet is the move and the unpacking and the unpacking inwardly as well in terms of who I am, who I'm becoming in this new space, and in facing the realities that we all are more aware of in the last couple of months, both with pandemic and now, of course, with dealing with systemic racism and so on. So lots of attention these days to the inner and outer landscapes of my life and how they weave together. And then should I pick someone now, or is that still going to be Katie's job?
You can pick somebody.
Well, next on my screen here is Fidumo.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Fidumo. I'm the membership coordinator here at Impact Hub. And I also just celebrated being here in the Twin Cities, a 6-month anniversary of that counts for anything. And also recently moved to St. Paul, so also unpacking a few things still. I guess it's shifted over the past couple of months, especially being here now and my past life being an activist. I kind of took pause, but my real passion is in mitigating misinformation and also user safety, having worked at social media companies before. So that's kind of what I've been working on outside of my role at the Hub. And I'm really excited to just learn, as Katie said, like add more tools to my toolbox of just how to respond to certain things and how to be mindful walking into certain situations where things may be super stressful, maybe not in the moment, but like I'll like reflect on it for a while. And so really excited for this. And now I'll pass it to Mickey.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Mickey Huntington, and I am working on being more intentional, being more connected, and also striving to really have a positive impact. So not just making an impact, but having a positive impact. So I wear a variety of different hats, primarily as a consultant and also as an educator in higher ed. And so working on being more present in my course course space. And for many of us, we were just chatting about it earlier, it's increasingly online in the virtual space. So how can I be more present? How can I be more human in humanizing that online or virtual space? And also learning from and with one another, not just about. So I'm looking forward to this session. This is in perfect alignment with my desire to really be more intentional and cultivate connections with others. So thank you very much. And I'm going to pass it off to Paul.
Thanks, Mickey. And hey, Mickey, good to see you. So I'm Paul. I am passionate about and I'm working on helping activists and change makers prevent burnout. And so what I'm mainly working on right now is a planner that will help folks, help guide them to more balance and a sustainable work-life routine, but really to encourage them to prioritize self-care and just kind of keep a finger on or a pulse on their health and prevent them from going down the road into burnout. So that's been kind of taking up a lot of my time lately. Oh, I'll pass it on to Muad.
Thanks, Paul. I'm Muad Al-Houni, and I'm an intern at Clip Different. And I am passionate about just being able to learn more about coding and every day, and trying to use Impact Hub to make, I don't know, more connections, I'd say, and learn more about how to make connections. And I'm really excited to be here to learn more about that.
I think I'm the last one. Bailey Johnson, Event and Marketing Manager, and I am at Impact Hub, and I'm passionate about building community and supporting social entrepreneurs.
All right, thank you for sharing. And now that we have those brief introductions, we are going to experiment with the breakout groups. So fingers crossed. Breakout rooms. Let's try 2 to 3 people. And I'm going to add in the chat. Basically, we're going to be looking at, the questions are, what is your intention for today's session? Or what are you hoping to learn about today's topic, which, you know, 2 sides of the same coin. I'll go ahead and put those into the chat. You should be able to see those from the breakout room. But so your intention, what you're looking forward to share that. And we'll probably just take 2 or 3 minutes to do that, and we'll bring you back. And we will dive back in. I'm curious if people could see the first chat messages that I sent in the chat, or if you had to only see them when I sent the broadcast message.
I think just broadcast message. It came up at the top.
Pops up at the top.
Yeah.
All right, so John Kabat-Zinn is one of the kind of fathers of the mindfulness movement in the United States. He started the mindfulness-based stress reduction program at UMass decades ago. And his definition of mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue. It's relatively simple and surprisingly difficult. And we'll have some opportunities to try some practices today. Now, there's tons of research on the benefits of mindfulness meditation, and these are some highlights, but I printed out. Reducing the perception of physical pain, improving immune function, encouraging better eating habits, reducing severity of chronic disease, improving sleep quality for relationships, promoting self-regulation so we're not as reactive, increasing empathy and pro-social behavior, lowering levels of emotional stress during conflict, enhancing communication, in personal relationships, increasing satisfaction, closeness, the acceptance of one's partner. For our emotional well-being, it improves symptoms of anxiety and depression, lowers stress hormones, facilitating a more relaxed and accepting state of being, increases tolerance to difficult situations, reduces negativity, fosters self-compassion, which decreases self-criticism and promotes more positive emotional responses, also increases connection with others, feelings, reducing feelings of loneliness. And when it comes to performance, which is definitely an area of emphasis for my clients, improving attention and working memory, improving or increasing motivation and learning, fostering greater emotional regulation, which allows us to think more clearly and see more possibilities, promoting greater openness to new perspectives and ideas, and enhancing problem solving. But wait, there's more. For teams and organizations, employee well-being and productivity at work, enhancing leadership abilities and strategies, skills needed for social interactions and conflict resolution, as well as moral reasoning and ethical decision-making. So there's been tons of studies that demonstrates the benefits of mindfulness, and mostly how we achieve these benefits are through practicing consistent meditation. And these last couple of slides were based on the Center for Spirituality and Healing from the University of Minnesota. So I first heard about Dan Harris from a top performing mortgage broker who happened to be a patient of mine. And I mentioned that with an emphasis of top performing, because we'll talk more about that as a meditation myth. So Dan Harris wrote 10% Happier, How I Tamed the Voice in My Head, Reduced Stress Without Losing My Edge, and Found Self-Help That Actually Works, a True Story. And later he published Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. Here's Dan Harris. You may know him as an ABC news anchor. And in 2004, Harris had a panic attack while delivering the news on Good Morning America with a live audience of 5 million viewers. He's not only driven as an anchor and journalist, he also became an app developer with the 10% Happier company. And at one point, he was doing 2 hours of meditation per day. Definitely not someone who was losing his edge or getting soft. And I'm going to have Dan share in his own words with a 3-minute video.
There's no way a fidgety and skeptical news anchor would ever have started meditating were it not for the science. The science is really compelling. It shows that meditation can boost your immune system, lower your blood pressure, help you deal with problems ranging from irritable bowel syndrome to psoriasis. And the neuroscience is where it really gets sci-fi. There was a study out of Harvard that shows that short daily doses of meditation can literally grow the gray matter in key areas of your brain having to do with self-awareness and compassion, and shrink the gray matter in the area associated with stress. There's also a study out of Yale that looked at what's called the default mode network of the brain. It's a connected series of brain regions that are active during most of our waking hours when we're doing that thing that human beings do all the time, which is obsessing about ourselves, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, doing anything but being focused on what's happening right now. Meditators not only turn off the default mode network of their brain while they're meditating, but even when they're not meditating. In other words, meditators are setting a new default mode. And what's that default mode? They're focused on what's happening right now. In sports, this is called being in the zone. It's nothing mystical. It's not magical. You're not floating off into cosmic ooze. You are just being where you are. The cliche in self-help circles is being in the now. You can use that term if you want, but because it's accurate, it's slightly annoying, but it's accurate. It's more just being focused on what you're doing. And the benefits of that are enormous. And this is why you're seeing these unlikely meditators now, why you're seeing the US Marines adopting it, the US Army, corporate executives from the head of Ford to the founders of Twitter, athletes from Phil Jackson to many, many Olympians, scientists, doctors, lawyers, school children. There's this sort of elite subculture of high achievers who are adopting this because they know it can help you be more focused on what you're doing, and it can stop you from being yanked around by the voice in your head. My powers of prognostication are not great. I bought a lot of stock in the company that made Palm Pilot back in 2000. And that didn't go so well for me. But having said that, I'm going to make a prediction. I think we're looking at meditation as the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told people that you went running, they would say, who's chasing you? Right now, if you tell people you meditate, and I have a lot of experience with telling people this, they're going to look at you like you're a little weird most of the time. That's going to change. Meditation is going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like exercise, brushing your teeth, and taking the meds that your doctor prescribes to you. These are all things that if you don't do, you feel guilty about. And that is where I think we're heading with meditation, because the science is so strongly suggestive that meditation can do really, really great things for your brain and for your body. The common assumption that we have, and it may be subconscious, is that our happiness really depends on external factors. How was our childhood? Have we won the lottery recently? Did we marry well? Did we marry at all? But in fact, meditation suggests that happiness is actually a skill, something you can train just the way you can train your body in the gym. It's a self-generated thing. And that's a really radical notion. It doesn't mean that external circumstances aren't going to impact your happiness. It doesn't mean you're not going to be subject to the vagaries of an impermanent entropic universe. It just means you were going to be able to navigate this with a little bit more ease.
So that's pretty compelling stuff. Hopefully between what Dan Harris has shared in his own way, I think he's so approachable. I think a lot of people who wouldn't consider themselves meditators or wouldn't otherwise be interested in meditation have really enjoyed Dan Harris because he makes it so approachable. So I want to just have kind of an open discussion for a couple of minutes. I love that Dan shared the idea that happiness is a skill, and that's why he named his app 10% Happier in his book as well. It's like, it's not going to completely transform your life, but if it can make you just 10% happier, that's probably enough to invest in. So I'm curious to hear what are some of the most surprising or interesting things that you learned today about some of the benefits, or what are some of the benefits that you would really like to see for yourself. And so we'll open it up. You can take yourself off mute. I don't think people will need to raise hands, or if you need to ask to unmute, you can raise your hand and I'll find you here.
So I'll go. This is Mickey. And I've read that book as well as several others. So thanks for sharing that. Two things. First, I shared with my small group how one of my intentions for today was to help establish a consistent practice. And by that, I mean not rediscovering mindfulness practice when things aren't going well, but to cultivate a consistent practice so that it's easier to tap into that when things don't go as you planned. And so instead of waiting for a panic attack or something bad happening, to really cultivate that practice consistently. And that called to mind, it's a Zen quote, and I'm not going to get this exactly right, but essentially it's, if you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, then meditate for an hour. So that idea of really tapping into the benefits, the opportunity really that mindfulness practice presents us each and every day by cultivating a consistent practice. So thanks for sharing that video.
Thanks, Nikki. And I love the idea of being proactive. You're absolutely right. It's so hard for us to make any significant changes when we're in a crisis mode. So hopefully getting into that consistent practice is going to help to set you up for success to be more resilient long-term or maintain resiliency. Anybody else have anything you'd like to share? Surprises, comments, intentions? Looks like
I'm surprised by the 2-hour-a-day meditation concept. I think in my brain, I'm like, what in the world does that even look like? I don't think I have any 2 hours alone at all to myself right now. I don't know what that looks like, let alone meditating space. So that would probably be the most shocking thing for me.
And, Dan Harris experimented with that for a period of time. I don't believe he's still doing that. I think it was probably a personal challenge to himself. I've known one other person that meditated every day for 2 hours, and she was someone I went to medical school with, and she was an amazing high performer, like 100% A student all the way through medical school, seemed to have a successful marriage, started working as a fitness instructor while we were in clinical training, and she was happy and vibrant and smart and lovable, personable. So, I mean, hopefully we don't all need to do 2 hours of meditation practice per day in order to see those benefits. Usually 5 to 10 or even 30 is sufficient. So we'll talk more about that. Any other shares for discussion before we move on?
I don't disagree with what he was saying or want to push back on it in terms of he seemed to put his attention or emphasis on, I think he used the phrase elite high performers and then listed, athletes and so on. And yes, that's good, but I guess I wouldn't count myself among them. And most people I know aren't among them. So I would add to what he said in terms of the benefits of mindfulness practice for sort of the rest of us, the everyday, ordinary, living on the treadmill sort of life that a lot of us live. Thich Nhat Hanh, or I think it's him, is famously to have written something about that mindfulness is really when you're washing the dishes, you are washing the dishes, right? So that there's something sort of accessible or democratizing, I guess, in the way that I like to think about not just meditation per se, but mindfulness practice more broadly speaking, that it's for all of us. And that helps it make it a little bit easier for me to imagine, maybe not literally 2 hours a day, but when I think about all the different kinds of pieces of things that I'm doing in my everyday life, and if I can just be a little bit more mindful as I'm doing those things, washing the dishes or walking the dog, or back in the day when I used to change diapers, don't do that anymore, but that makes it a little more easy to imagine that little pieces of mindfulness attention to whatever those everyday, ordinary, accessible things in life are, that's where I'm drawn.
Great. Yeah, and so, I highlighted the performance aspect because that's, I think, what a lot of people that are skeptical to meditation are interested in. But yeah, one of the greatest benefits of mindfulness is just allowing ourselves to be present in this moment, which is literally the only moment that we have. We don't have a past or a future. We only have what we're experiencing here. So it's great to see some of those benefits in your own life. So I think we're gonna move on, getting into some myths about mindfulness. Before we get there, just the highlights of how mindfulness works. And I use the dumbbells because meditation and mindfulness, these are skills that need to be practiced. It's like exercise, and we get the best results when practiced consistently. So taking better care of our bodies, being better able to listen to other people, checking some of our thoughts or assumptions to see if they're helpful, and being more present, being able to notice things in our environment and respond rather than react. So some myths, that meditation may make you less ambitious. This is a fun cartoon. It says, like the man says, bro, just be. And I think Dan Harris has a nice comeback to the less ambitious again. He talks about being intrigued by the notion of achieving greater peace of mind. But he says, quote, but I worried that if I got too happy, I'd lose my edge, or worse, I'd end up wearing my wife's yoga pants to work. Turns out, meditation does not require you to abandon all stress. In fact, I still believe the price of security is insecurity. This is something his father used to say. If you're going to achieve anything great, it will, in my opinion, inevitably involve some plotting, planning, and wringing of hands. However, meditation has taught me we tend to make our suffering worse than it needs to be. Mindfulness, the self-awareness generated through meditation, has helped me to draw the line between useless rumination and what I call constructive anguish. This has made a huge difference for me, boosting my resilience and creativity at work while improving my relationships at home. Although I'm far from perfect, my wife believes my book should actually be called 90% Still a Moron. So that's a nice quote from Dan Harris. Another myth is that there's only one way to meditate. People think about maybe sitting on the ground or on a cushion in lotus position, and you can actually do meditation sitting, walking, laying down, as long as you can remain alert and awake. And then there's also movement that can be more intentionally mindful. So yoga, tai chi, running, swimming, all of these things really focus on the breath. And so there's definitely a way to see this as meditative, although different meditation teachers debate whether or not these things can be considered meditation in itself or just mindful movement. I think regardless, when you're doing any of these activities and you can do them in silence, be present, maybe running without listening to a podcast, just being present with your breathing and the nature. I don't have time to meditate. So if the expectation were 2 hours, then I would say, yeah, most of us don't have 2 hours a day to meditate, or maybe wouldn't even see it as a worthwhile investment. But 30 minutes a day could be doable for a lot of people. I think a lot of us don't have a commute that maybe we used to have. And lots of teachers recommend 5 to 10 minutes of daily practice. There's even been research demonstrating the benefits with as little as 2 minutes a day. And I like what Light Watkins shares about some of the other benefits of investing in meditation. He's also a meditation instructor. He argues in his TEDx talk that you don't have time not to meditate, given the potential to reverse your biological age and add years back to your life. So if you were 30, after 5 years, your biological age would look like 36 without meditation. I think the extra year is just added because of natural stressors and environment. And with meditation, our age could look more like 23. So that's a nice incentive if you're not convinced so far. I don't have the focus for meditation. Honestly, I felt this way for a long time myself. I thought I was a bad meditator because my mind would wander. And the fact is, we're Homo sapiens. We are humans that think by definition. The key is to notice when this is happening and bring yourself back to the present moment awareness without judgment. You can think of training your mind like you would a puppy, hopefully with more compassion than scolding or criticism. And the goal with meditation is not to reach a special state. It's just to see whatever's happening in our mind clearly. And when you see your thoughts and feelings clearly, they have less power to yank you around. So a couple of quick tips to help you commit to your practice. Start with even 2 minutes a day. If you're a complete beginner, you've never had a meditation practice, 2 minutes is not a long time. You know, it's about the time we would spend brushing our teeth. If you're not ready to sit down on the cushion, you can practice mindfully brushing your teeth or using your non-dominant hand to brush your teeth. Frequency is more important than quantity or the length of time. So really aim for almost daily. 2 minutes is just the start. Hopefully in the second week, you're doing 3 to 5 minutes, but just something to work to creating a habit oftentimes just means finding the time in your schedule for starters. Again, it's okay if your mind wanders. Just once you become aware, you bring it back to the present moment and be patient with yourself. Again, simple but not easy, and it can take time to notice the results. For some people, months or years, and often it's other people that start to notice the changes in ourselves before we see them. So a quick recap of what we've covered in kind of the first half of our session today. What is mindfulness, the benefits, some myths and tips for practice. And I think we'll just take maybe 2 minutes if there's any burning questions. And then I want to make sure that we have time for a break. So any questions before we break related to mindfulness, before we hop into our break and then get into productivity and some other topics? Nothing burning just yet? Okay, and there'll also be some time at the end. So, break time. I'm gonna see if I can put on a little music, and right now it's 12:55. So I wanna make sure that people can take a mindful break. Hopefully you're not jumping into a task. Grab a pen or paper if that's helpful for a partner exercise that we'll do a little bit later. Try to find an item of food that's bite-sized. So a piece of fruit, a chocolate, a tortilla chip, a potato chip. We're gonna be doing a mindful eating exercise as soon as we get back. It's 12:55. We're gonna come back right at hopefully people had the opportunity for a mindful break. I was gonna encourage people not to look at their phones or check emails since there's really not enough time to respond to anything during that time. But I didn't provide those instructions, so I won't necessarily ask who did that. So now that we're back together, I think we're task switching. It's a good time to do another micro practice again from Search Inside Yourself. This practice is called 3 breaths, and that's just what it is. It's a practice of taking 3 mindful breaths that can help you to refresh, be more present, get off autopilot, and make a choice about what to do next. Hopefully what you're going to do next is just get back to being grounded and present in the task at hand. So we're going to take a breath together, a complete yet gentle attention to the process of breathing. So first breath. In our second breath, we just let the body relax. And the third breath, ask, what's most important now? Hopefully that's presence and attention. So again, this is just a brief practice that you can implement between different tasks, before or after break, when you're wrapping up different things or starting a meeting. And now we're going to do the mindful eating exercise. And I'm using a script from Christine Milovani based on John Kabat-Zinn's Full Catastrophe Living. And this practice takes, I'd say, 3 or 4 minutes. Hopefully everybody has something they can eat. You're welcome to turn off your camera because it can feel weird to eat in front of other people, especially to try to do something mindfully. So totally up to you if you want cameras on or off. Again, this is just a few minutes practice. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. Begin by connecting to your breath and your body. Feel your feet on the ground and notice your experience in this moment. With your awareness in this moment, notice any thoughts, sensations, or emotions you are experiencing. Tune into the awareness or sensation that you have in your body of feeling hungry, thirsty, or maybe even full. If you were going to eat or drink something right now, what is your body hungry for or thirsty for? Just pay attention and notice with awareness the sensations that give you this information. Now bring your attention to the item in front of you and imagine that you're seeing it for the first time. Observe with curiosity as you pay attention and notice the color, shape, texture, and size. Is there anything else you notice or sense or feel? Imagine what it took for this item to get to your hands. Sunshine, water, time, processing, and shipping. You may choose to be aware of gratitude for everyone involved in the cultivation and preparation of this item of food. You may choose to bring your own gratitude or blessing. Now place the food between your fingers and feel the texture and the temperature. You may notice smoothness or stickiness. Again, notice if you have thoughts or sensations or emotions at this time. Continue to breathe and be fully present in this moment. Now take the food and bring it towards your nose and smell with your full awareness. Notice if you have any memories, sensations, or reactions in your body. Even before you eat it, you may notice that you begin to have a digestive response in your body just by noticing and smelling. With full awareness of your hand moving towards your mouth, place the object into your mouth without chewing or swallowing. Just allow it to be in your mouth. Roll it around to different parts of your mouth and tongue. Notice the flavor and texture. Notice the physical sensations within your body, especially your mouth and your gut. Continue to breathe as you explore the sensation of having this item in your mouth. Now take just one bite and notice the flavor. Notice the change of texture. Then very slowly begin to chew the piece of food. Notice the parts of your mouth that are involved in chewing. Notice the sound and movement of chewing as you continue to notice the sensations and flavor. When you're ready, notice this item and the path that it follows from your mouth and throat into your stomach. Notice the sensation and the taste that may linger in your mouth. Connect again to your body and your breath, and notice your experience in this moment. Next, I invite you to think about how you may implement this the next time that you're eating. So feel free to chew and swallow and finish your food. And we'll have a discussion. Excuse me. So I'm curious to know how many of you have done a mindful eating practice in the past? Okay, Chris, Katie, anybody else? Okay, so it sounds like this was new for most people. Curious to hear if you noticed anything different, if you felt more present to the experience of eating, if you noticed anything new about the food that you were eating, and if you could take the time during your meals to experience your meals more mindfully, what might be different? So I'm curious to hear people's thoughts.
So I've done it before, but it's been like 15 years. It's been a long time. So it's fun to do. It's almost like I did it the first time. And as we were getting ready, first, when you had mentioned some ideas of food to get, I immediately went for the chocolate. And then as I was thinking about, I bet you this is what this process is going to look like, I went and grabbed raspberries, which we have from our garden. And they're fresh right now. And so the whole experience was just really fun because I've been eating raspberries for a couple of weeks now, but I haven't like sat and like gone through the process. And so even to think about like all the people that help pick raspberries, because we have neighbors coming all the time to help us. We have a huge raspberry patch. And then my little daughter, who won't go to bed on time, I was like, hey, how do you feel about raspberries? So that was really fun just to experiment and watch her eat a raspberry. And like, normally I have 3 kids, so I'm just like shoveling food in her mouth and being like, here, go eat. I have to like manage my other kids. So to like sit in the presence of watching her experience the food that for the first time was really fun too. So thank you for the opportunity to kind of go through that process.
Nice. Interesting. What came up a couple of times from what you said, it sounds like connection, like your connection to the other people that helped you to pick raspberries and your connection with your family when you're sharing food together. That's really interesting. I think so oftentimes we're eating mindlessly and we're not feeling the connection or noticing everything that went into the food that we're eating.
Katie, it almost looks like she's wearing raspberries on her outfit.
She probably will be soon.
No, I mean the blue dots.
Anybody else have thoughts? I think part of what, one of the big barriers to eating more mindfully is probably just feeling the lack of time. You know, we are rushing from place to place. And even if it's just virtual meetings, it's like some of us are very tightly scheduled and eating is not a priority, unfortunately. And so, you know, it's hard to sit down and take that extra time. But I feel like with any kind of mindfulness practice, it's a really nice investment that we can really enjoy that. Okay, so changing gears and changing fonts. You may notice that. This is kind of part 2. It's almost its own presentation. Of course, it dovetails with mindfulness and looking at some of the benefits of being more mindful and you know, focused when it comes to productivity. I think productivity and presence can be more important now than ever, especially for the remote worker, which is probably all of us, if not 100% of the time. Most of the time we're remote, even if you're going into the co-working space, but you're still potentially separated from a team if you have one. Even if you're a solopreneur, just being in a different environment or being at home with more distractions than you're used to can definitely be a challenge. Lots of people have difficulty with setting boundaries and plugging after work, creating some work-life balance. You might feel more isolated, difficulty staying motivated. So those are struggles with people who were working remotely in 2019 before people had to work remotely, and maybe it was more of an employee perk or benefit. So I previously gave a presentation at the Impact Hub in December on productivity with Carte. And I think it's good to kind of recap some of the main ideas there because they dovetail well with the productivity with presence. So priorities such as starting with yourself and self-care, setting intentions and being thoughtful, challenging your defaults. A good example of this is when you wake up in the morning, not checking your email or social media when you're still in bed. I have a hard and fast rule about that I don't check any of that until I've gotten downstairs and started my workday on my computer. Flexibility each day and week will be unique, and that's okay. And setting boundaries, setting limits with your work hours, as well as with social media or any other distractors that you may have. And what I've developed for productivity with presence is a system on getting clear. And I know for most of us, mnemonics are easier to remember. So clarity about the task at hand. I think one of the main detractors that I noticed from my own productivity is when I would get up in the morning and start my work day. If I have a list of tasks at hand, I might spend some time trying to decide what is the most important. So I try to clarify that actually the day before when I'm wrapping up my work day, to be very clear about what's the most important thing to get done the next morning. L is for listening to what you need, your preferences, your hour, and your environment. I am a natural morning person. It works really well for me to get up before my family and start my work day, maybe even get in some exercise before work or my intention setting practice. Some people are natural night owls, and I don't know that it's necessarily productive to try to change your whole circadian rhythms and try to work in a 9 to 5 if that's not what works for you. I know lots of creatives that get spurts of inspiration in the wee hours, and if that's what works for you, as long as you get the sleep that you need, I think that's totally fine. Another thing about environment, I'm an extrovert, so I really enjoy working in co-working spaces and having the opportunity to interact with people when that's safe and possible. Engage with your heart as well as your mind to be fully present, whether you're working on a project or meeting with someone else. I think people really notice when your heart's not fully engaged. Intention improves when we can identify and remove distractions, like not having lots of windows open when you're in a meeting, having your phone on do not disturb or out of reach when you're trying to have some focus time. And then resting with breaks after about 50 minutes, which is why we took a break a few minutes ago, and rest in terms of quality sleep, which for most adults is 7 to 9 hours. That might seem like a lot for some people, but that's what most of us need statistically. The secret of 10% of the most productive people. This is the top 10 set of most productive, not just 10% of people that are productive. So this is a study done by Desk Time. They did a study of productive employees to understand their habits and to learn from them. The answer is breaking, like not nervous breaking, just having consistent breaks. So Desk Time is an employee productivity tracking software, and they computer monitored time for 5.5 million logged records per day. They took all this data and they analyzed the usage of apps and websites that users consider to be productive. And then they isolated the top 10% of most productive employees, those who had the highest ratio of using productive applications for their line of work. And they found that basically everybody needs a break after around 50 minutes or so. After that, there's kind of a diminishing returns on our focus. And they describe it as concentration is like a muscle. It needs to rest to be able to function, and it shouldn't be overworked. Otherwise, it'll simply burn out and take longer to get back into the swing of things. I think we're seeing a lot of exercise and muscle analogies when it comes to meditation as well. It's like the mindfulness practice and attention, like concentration, they're very similar. And they need to be practiced, but they also need to be rested. And many of you may be familiar with the Pomodoro technique. Traditionally, this is 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of break. Given Desk Time's ratio for productivity, they found on average people do 52 minutes of work and then do a 17-minute break. This may seem kind of arbitrary. I prefer 50 minutes of work and 10 minutes of break. So I actually use a timer, an app on my phone called Focus To Do, and I have this new, it's called the time timer, where you can actually set it for 50 minutes and it'll count down. It's just a nice visual, but definitely, you know, the original Pomodoro was done with a kitchen timer, a tomato-shaped kitchen timer, and that's why it was called a Pomodoro. The other thing about doing 50 minutes is you can get a lot done if you can be free from distractions. So there's a productivity expert named Demir Bentley, and he talks about the Pomodoro. I repurposed that to the fear of missing out Doro. I think sometimes our concentration is broken by distraction. We want to check our phone, we want to check social media. If you're not doing your full 50 minutes without distraction, you're not really completing your time. It's not a full Pomodoro. Or if you skip your breaks, you can sometimes shorten your breaks. That's okay. Sometimes I'm finishing up, like writing a blog post, and I just want to get a couple more thoughts on paper. Usually it doesn't take me more than another minute or two, and then I can start a 10-minute break. And this Pomodoro technique is a time management strategy that was invented by Francesco Cirillo. And I mentioned a little bit about intention before. For me, I find that it's often helpful to start the day with a morning intention. It can be a formal practice of just sitting down and thinking about what your schedule holds, what parts of yourself you want to bring to the table. Sometimes it's still just while I'm laying in bed between snoozes, thinking about what I have coming up on the day. The other thing, Nir Eyal, he wrote a book called Indistractable, and he says that you can't legitimately call something a distraction if you're not clear about traction or what the project is at hand. I keep bringing up social media just because that seems to be a big time suck for people. Like, who's to say that that's a distraction if you had nothing else on your schedule? But if your goal was to work on your blog post or work on your presentation in my situation, anything else that deviates from that task is a distraction. Another thing that I really like to emphasize for my clients, and often it comes up naturally, is just looking at connection. And that's part of what we've discussed in Productivity with Heart, is aligning your values with your schedule and making sure that self-care and relationships are top priorities, because these tend to improve our life satisfaction. So when I lived in New York, there was an artist named De La Vega, and he would just leave these chalk art or quotes that he made up, and they would just be such a great example of impermanence, because chalk, the rain comes and it gets washed away. And I remember after my first meditation course and moving back to New York to become an EMT, walking around the city and seeing this, be mindful even if your mind is full. Easier said than done, but a great reminder. And I think this is definitely something to keep in mind in our interactions with others, because we can be so distracted that we're not present. So this brings us back to that Productivity with Heart. We talk about clarifying your values, and if relationships are a priority to you, they really need to be on your calendar consistently. The way I do this is with recurring calendar reminders. I recently did an Instagram live with somebody, and the person interviewed me and said, that doesn't sound very spontaneous or romantic. And I said, well, maybe not spontaneous, but it can definitely be romantic. So this might be Friday night happy hours, or during the week, usually my partner and I connect. We set aside time for meaningful connection. It's very intentional. It's not like, hey, let's just sit in front of the TV and watch 3 hours of Netflix. It's like, hey, I found this podcast that I thought would be really cool to listen to together. Or, maybe it's an article or something else that I wanted to discuss. We just found the Desert Island Discs from BBC, and that's kind of a neat podcast interview that's been going on since the 1940s, before they had podcasts, just asking famous people if they were on a desert island, what discs or songs they would want to have, and I believe what book as well. So that's kind of fun. Practicing presence. It's really difficult to develop and feel connection if one or both of you are not mentally present. So that's something that needs to be intentional as well. and then mindful communication, which we're going to talk about more. And Oren J. Stouffer wrote a book on mindful communication, and so I'm going to share something that he wrote. It says, consider for a moment how many misunderstandings you've had simply because someone wasn't paying attention, or how different it feels to speak to someone who gives you their full attention and someone who is distracted or only half listening. If you want to stop arguing, start being more present. The second condition for an effective conversation is choosing a clear and helpful intention. How we speak, listen, and relate is guided primarily by our intention, by where we're coming from. Intention is the motivating force or action behind our words and actions. Before and even during a challenging conversation, take a few moments to recollect your values. What's most important to you? Regardless of the outcome, how do you want to show up? When we speak and act in line with our values, we have more clarity, power, and integrity. So the next two slides are really packed, and I was hoping that I could get a volunteer to read this slide and then a second volunteer to read the second slide. This is Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Vietnamese Zen master or teacher. He wrote one of the explanations of the 5 precepts of Buddhism. One of these is mindful speech, and here he calls it loving speech and deep listening. And I didn't want to paraphrase because I really feel like everything that he's talking about here is really important. So I would love if someone would volunteer to read aloud this slide.
I can do it. Let's see.
Thanks for doing that.
Anytime.
Can you see it? Hold on, let me.
Yeah.
There you go.
You can see it. Aware of the suffering caused by unmindful speech and the inability to listen to others, I am committed to cultivating loving speech and compassionate listening in order to relieve suffering and to promote reconciliation and peace in myself and among other people, ethnic and religious groups, and nations. Knowing that words can create happiness or suffering, I am committed to speaking truthfully, using words that inspire confidence, joy, and hope. When anger is manifesting in me, I am determined not to speak.
Thank you. Let's go to the next one. This is the same paragraph. So, could I find another volunteer to read this?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Megan.
I will practice mindful breathing and walking in order to recognize and to look deeply into my anger. I know that the roots of anger can be found in my wrong perceptions and lack of understanding of the suffering in myself and in the other person. I will speak and listen in a way that can help myself and the other person to transform suffering and see the way out of difficult situations. I am determined not to spread news that I do not know to be certain and not to utter words that can cause division or discord. I will practice right diligence to nourish my capacity for understanding, love, joy, and inclusiveness, and gradually transform anger, violence, and fear that lie deep in my consciousness.
And I know Chris had mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh, so you may have heard or read this before, but I'm curious to hear what are your thoughts or feelings when you read this or hear this? Like, what comes to mind, or can you imagine what our relationships or even the world would be like if we were more intentional in our speech?
One thing that came to my mind is it seems like a lot of the ways that I relate to others, especially in a work setting, is by like whining about things and like, you commiserate over the commute or, how stressful this upcoming meeting is or something like that. And so just to hear those words and rethink, okay, do I really need to talk about this negatively, or, finding new ways to connect with, especially my coworkers, other than like shared commiseration.
Yeah, for sure. Commiseration is a way that we really connect. And unfortunately, like, I think another way that we connect is gossip, talking about other people, situations that we don't even know 100% to be true. I think it helps us to maybe feel better about ourselves is talking about other people. And it's really hard. Like, I personally, like, every New Year's for so many years, I had this New Year's resolution that this year I'm going to practice right speech, and that's going to be my intention. And to put it into action consistently is really difficult because we are so mindless in so many of our communications. And just when you think about venting or commiserating from a psychological perspective, for every for every negative, we need to have 3 positives, because we have a natural negativity bias. So it's like we almost need a mental palate cleanser after we've had a negative interaction. Take some deep breaths and trying to say, like, okay, I really needed to get that off my chest, but not to be Pollyanna about it, but like, I don't know, did something positive happen in your day or your week, or can we just, change gears a little bit? Because I'd rather end with a bit of an uplift, which, might not seem natural all the time, but I think it is helpful. Anybody else?
So a couple of thoughts come to mind. First is, in reading that second slide, it just reminded me that we can't have one without the other. So you can't have or fully experience or appreciate joy without having anger, or, you know what I mean? There's always that sort of dichotomy in the experiences that we have. And then on the other point about how we speak or how we choose to communicate, especially being a teacher, I find that I'm talking a lot. And just a reminder that really effective communication is not just how I speak, but what is being heard, right? And so really taking the time to intentionally listen, as well as being conscious of right speech, is important as well.
Yeah. And a lot of our speech or communication is nonverbal, which is a whole nother thing that can be difficult. Like, sometimes we just have a facial expression that may show like criticism or disinterest, and that might not be the case at all, but that's just like our resting expression. So there's a lot that we could really be more intentional around.
I really love this part of the presentation. I'm just thinking about like bigger picture, not just ourselves, but conversations that we have with loved ones, and the like concept of listening. I don't think about a lot, but I'm going to think about it this week. I just wrote a post-it note and put it on my computer here. When I think about even some of the things going on in like the protests, and then like just like the quick Twitter of, what are they asking for? What are, the quote unquote they, but like really taking some time to do some reading, not just the news, but there must be blogs that are written by people that are in those protests and the requests that they're making, and really seeking to understand. I know one of our anchor tenants, MBN, has been involved in some events at Mount Rushmore, and it's interesting to take the extra time to listen and read right now. And so we truly do understand the other's point, and again, quotes the other's point of view. Mm-hmm. So thanks for that intention for the week.
Absolutely. And I know, these productivity, connection, communication, all of these could be presentations on their own. But we are going to have an opportunity to practice mindful communication. And this is a practice that I got from mindfulness teacher Elaine Smokler. She wrote for mindful.org. And so the idea is to halt whatever you're doing and offer your full attention. And the acronym is HEAR, H-E-A-R. I think we can be here in the present, H-E-R-E, and we can also hear and listen. Enjoy a breath as you choose to receive. whatever is being communicated to you. Ask yourself if you really know what they mean, and if you don't, ask for clarification. Instead of making assumptions, bring openness and curiosity to the interaction. And then reflect back on what you've heard. This helps them to know that you're really listening. And so I want us to do a practice together, and hopefully we will be able to do this in pairs. I'll have to double check the breakout rooms. So the idea here is just to spend a few minutes talking about maybe what's come up for you about mindful communication, what's coming up for you today during the presentation, or maybe even something that's on your mind from earlier in the week. And person A will say is the person whose name starts earlier in the alphabet. We'll talk, and B will mindfully listen. Pretty open, the topic. And you'll have 2 minutes. And then B talks, and A mindfully listens. And then you'll have 2 minutes of free flow, talking about what this experience was like, what you noticed. I'll put this slide in the chat. Also find it can be helpful when you're listening to take notes if you have that opportunity, especially when you're having the meta conversation or reflecting back. So let's take a look at the breakout options, and I'll share this. Oh, looks like we have that here. I'm gonna put this in the chat. All right, and then we'll see what the options are for breakout rooms. I wonder, okay. It looks like the way we would do this, Faduma would be without a partner. And I'm gonna make some changes here. I'm gonna give Bailey an opportunity to chat with me. And let's see how we might mix this up a little bit. This is probably boring to watch me do this. All right. So Katie and Mickey will have a chance to chat, and Chris and Fadumo, and then Bailey, you'll be in a room with me. And so 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and I'll try to keep track. Bailey, are you here?
Hello, yes.
Hey. So we just have fewer people, so I thought I would just have you skip the exercise for better or for worse. Maybe you can practice with Paul later.
Okay, that sounds
I
good.
just figured you'd be open to taking a break. And imagine we're recording your screen, so we won't get into any major discussions. I'm just keeping track of the time. So they have 1.5 minutes. I should let them know when they have 30 seconds.
Sounds good.
How was the mini break for you?
Oh, that was great. Yeah,
Short.
yeah, but it was good just to get up and walk around and stretch, and even like with the music, I was kind of dancing.
Yeah. I know you have your 5 o'clock work dance sessions with Paul.
Yeah. So it was really nice. And we had talked about it before. I know you didn't prompt it in the session, but how, you don't want it long enough for people to like check their email or anything. So I made sure I didn't do that. I didn't look at my phone.
Good. Yeah, I wish I had prefaced that. A message in the chat.
The time goes so fast.
I know. Yeah. And actually, we just have a couple of wrap-up slides. And you are welcome to take another break if you want. We have 4 more minutes.
Okay.
So,
okay, well, with some more water, I'll be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So that was just a very brief practice. And yeah, I probably could have given more precise instructions about reflective listening, but hopefully, I think one of the powers of this practice is just for one person to speak at a time, which often doesn't happen. I know sometimes we feel like we don't have enough to say, or we want to run out of things to say, or if you pause and have some silence, that feels uncomfortable. But I think it's a powerful practice just to really take turns. I believe there's a Native American tradition of like a talking stick that would just be passed around, and only the person holding the stick can speak. And I think that allows everyone to be very clear about who's speaking, and also for everybody else to kind of hold their intention for them. So let me get back into the presentation mode. And we just have a few more slides. We're wrapping up with time and material. So a few more things before we close today. Just a recap of the practices that we've done. A moment to arrive that we started with, the 3 breaths when we came back from break, the mindful eating exercise, and then this mindful communication exercise. Some ideas for recommended reading, since I'm currently enrolled in the Search Inside Yourself course. The book is definitely a recommendation. Really lots of great information and also lots of practices to try. For a future to be possible, that's Thich Nhat Hanh, and that's where the 5 precepts come from, his rendering of the 5 precepts, including the right speech. And Say What You Mean by Oren J. Schoffer. So I'm actually just starting to read this book, but it's really interesting. He combines nonviolent communication with mindfulness, and he's been a meditation teacher with an emphasis on communication for quite some time. So I really enjoy his material and resources. So that brings us to questions. We covered so much today. A time check, it's 1:47. I don't see any reason to stay all the way until 2 o'clock. If we finish up before that, you have a couple extra minutes in your day. And so I'll just open it up. Questions about meditation, about creating the habit of meditating consistently, questions about productivity hacks, apps, anything else that you're curious about.
So Tamara, thank you so much for sharing. This is a short question, which probably is a much longer answer and maybe even a separate workshop. But I was sharing with Katie how in the back of my mind, I'm still wrestling with the differences and similarities or distinction between mindfulness and meditation. And so I just wanted to offer that as a thought to consider.
Yeah, that's a good question. So meditation is just one way of practicing mindfulness. We can do all kinds of activities mindfully. We can wash our dishes mindfully. We can hold hands with our partner mindfully. We can do all of these exercises in a mindful way. But what we've found is that the practice of doing meditation in particular, that consistent practice, is what helps us to be more present, more consistently. And so they definitely overlap, but mindfulness is a way, or meditation is a way to become more mindful. I think in the presentation I used it often interchangeably. Of course, they're different. You can meditate without approaching mindfulness, and you can be mindful without meditating.
Thank you.
Question. Chris?
Yeah, thank you from me as well. This has been really outstanding.
Right.
I hope this isn't too much of an obscure question, but I was struck by, at one point you kind of in passing noted that we are wired for, I think you called it negativity bias, and for every one negative thought or word that we need to sort of overcompensate by focusing on 3 positive words or thoughts. What are you or anybody yet in the group able to tell us about sort of the evolutionarily wired why do we have negativity bias? Where does that come from, evolutionarily speaking?
Yeah.
Especially when it's also the case that we are, a lot of research has shown, the Greater Good Science Center out of Berkeley and other places talk about how we are wired for cooperation rather than competition, for interrelationship rather than independence, things like that. So what does that deal with negativity bias?
So, and those things are not mutually exclusive. The negativity bias comes from evolutionarily just getting into the fight or flight mode. When we think something could be a bear that we see out of the corner of our eye, we need to assume that it's a bear before we assume that it's a tree or a potted plant that's not going to be threatening to us. So our mind naturally goes, and you may have just, had a startle in a situation like this, or maybe even sometimes something happens and you might immediately go to the worst case scenario. This has just been developed for our own survival. But the reality is that most of our situations today are not life and death. And so we don't need to have such a strong negativity bias as we did when we were just fighting to survive. However, evolution, it took millions of years for us to adapt and develop. The people who assumed that the tree was a bear, they were more likely to survive. And so it's really hard to undo that. Some ways that we can be more positive in our interactions, like sometimes starting meetings just with like a fun icebreaker, or sharing some kudos or some gratitude or appreciation. And gratitude journaling in particular has really been shown to help us overcome our negativity bias. There's been a lot of research about that. But yes, also happiness is our default state. And cooperation is also natural. I was just listening to a Blink book about this today. Blinkist app is great because you can listen to a book in 15 minutes. And they were talking about, as much as we thought Lord of the Flies situations would come up, where if you put kids alone on an island, they would kill each other, that this actually happened at some time in the 20th century. And the kids made a pact to help each other no matter what and not to fight. And a lot of research shows that in adversity, we rise to the occasion. Being in 9/11, being in New York during that time, there was an amazing sense of solidarity. And people could have gotten selfish. They could have gotten meaner. There's so many things that could have happened, but we all found ways to, I think, recognize our commonalities. So there's a negativity bias. There's a lot we can do to overcome it. And there is definitely a reason for its development. It's a good question. Anybody else? Other questions that come to mind? And if there's no other questions, that's fine too. If anybody wants to connect with me one-on-one, please find me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. Definitely want to thank everybody for their time and attention. I like this quote from Oren J. Sofer, who talks about the communication. Self-awareness is the foundation for a meaningful life and for creating understanding, creativity, connection, and collaboration in relationship. And self-awareness is just another one of those benefits that we can achieve through meditation and practicing mindfulness. So I appreciate your attention, your presence, your engagement, your willingness to participate. I hope that this was a useful and productive use of your time, and that I've inspired you either to begin a practice of meditation or become more consistent with that practice. And I'd love to connect with each of you, connect on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to find me. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and my website and blog are there as well. If anybody is interested in taking a deeper dive, I also, I'm happy to connect by Zoom for a call or even a phone call. So that's all that I have today. I know it was a lot to pack in. It's 1:54, so we're still on time. You have a couple minutes back in your day, hopefully, to take a moment of mindfulness, do a quick stretch, take a pause before you jump into your next activity. I really appreciate, again, this opportunity from the Impact Hub, the help from Bailey in particular, and I look forward to connecting with each of you soon. And good luck, Mickey and Chris, on your presentations.
Thanks so much.
Take care, everybody.
Tamara.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Have a great one.